There's no mountains, nothing obstructing your view, and nothing that's obstructing the electromagnetic transmissions. When the rocket goes up, the missile goes up, it emanates all kinds of radiations, right? Electromagnetic and so on. From that you can learn the capacity of the missile, the rocket motor, and so on. And you can get a good idea of what the capability is. And that's called the telemetry that the Chinese have been reading on Indian missiles and rockets fired from Gopalpur. So that is there. Now the clever thing that the Chinese do is that, for instance, when Admiral Arun Prakash, the Indian naval chief, went to Myanmar, and he said, oh, you guys have given Coco Islands to China, and this is very bad. We can't tolerate this. They said, no, there's no Chinese presence on Coco Islands. We'll take you to Coco Islands. Took him to Coco Islands. There was nothing there. Why was there nothing there? Because most of the ELINT stations are mobile, right? I mean, it's a simple thing. You can put up a telemetry tracking station in 2 or 3 convoys, truck convoys. You just open them up, bring out your radar and your sensors, and read with your satellites. The Chinese satellites are moving up there. You coordinate with the things here, get the telemetry read on the missiles, Indian missiles. So when Arun Prakash went there, he saw nothing. He came back, he said, no, there's nothing there. So I told Arun Prakash, Arey Baba, did you ever consider it's all mobile? Do you think the Chinese are foolish that they would want to imperil the situation they are in and in a sense embarrass their hosts, the Myanmaris, who claim that no, Chinese have no say, but they have. They're in Coco Islands. Which is precisely the kind of line of sight we have on Hainan Island which we have now on Hainan Island, the South Seas Fleet. So we read their electronic signalings and so on and so forth. So, we have,
China, the role of Japan.
Yeah, the role of Japan is finally we have woken up. In my first book, published in 1994, it was curiously called Future Imperiled. India's Security in the 1990s and Beyond, it's published by Viking. I said precisely that the only way India can contain China, I said then the China is the main adversary, is for India to have a coalition of the rimland countries, rimland to Asia. All the Southeast Asian countries and offshore countries like Japan and Taiwan. And we should use our Tibet card, which we haven't done. And I haven't even talked about the Tibet card, which we can do. Because the Chinese have used the northeastern rebel movements in our Indian northeast to discomfit us strategically. They have financed them, given them safe haven, armed them, equipped them, and yet we are somehow chary of doing the same with the Tibetan exile community. I simply don't understand this. It beggars my imagination as to why it is that we show ourselves up as so weak and, in a sense, inattentive to our own interests.
Because we have only politicians and no statesmen in this country.
I'm sorry?
All these problems are there because we have only politicians and no statesmen.
I won't argue with that, sir.
So if you don't mind, I would like to offer a small clarification on the Coco Islands.
Sure.
By my experience of sailing the Bay of Bengal from Chennai to the Andaman Islands for a full decade, from 1991 to 2001, I have gone past the Coco Islands any number of times in all weather,
Okay.
by day, by night, by twilight, morning, evening.
And you couldn't
I'm
find
afraid
anything?
I have not seen
Found
even
it.
a single light bulb on that.
Okay.
And even if you say there are mobile ELINT stations, there must be some antennas
Yeah.
that are going to stick out.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, if anybody has seen Narcondam Sound Island, which is part of India, which is close
Yeah.
by on the Andaman
Yeah.
thing, Coco Island is exactly a carbon copy of Narcondam Sound with a greater danger. On the Myanmar side, when you go through Coco Channel, you will find that Coco Island is ringed by small rocks which jut out of the sea.
Yeah.
Therefore, no boat can ever approach it. I have not seen Myanmarese fishing boats come anywhere within 1 nautical mile of these rocks. So, if at all the Chinks are going there, they are going only by helicopter.
Possible.
By sea, it is out of the question.
Not possible. Okay.
The next point I would like to make is just 32 nautical miles south of Coco Island is Port Cornwallis in India,
Yeah.
Diglipur, which is the
Digli,
district
yes,
headquarters.
right.
And at water's edge, there is a airstrip, which I am told now has been so
Is
concretized
operational,
that
yeah.
your Tejas aircraft
Yeah.
can operate from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which means Coco Island is exactly 2 minutes flying.
Flight. Operational flight.
So I really wonder whether the Chinese would take that risk to come in there. It's open to question. But what I have seen, I'm telling, I've not even seen a light bulb burn on that island. As far as I'm concerned as a mariner, I think it's an uninhabited island.
But that was 20 years ago, is that right?
No, the 1991 itself, you had the media reports telling that Coco has gone to the Chinese. And from then onwards till 2001, I've been hearing it. But the fact is, geography again, you cannot say that a boat is going to come because of the rocks
Yeah.
that ring around the
No, but
island.
I'm not
It's
talking about the-
physically impossible.
Yeah, I'm not talking about
And
the-
it's open to both the weathers, southwest and northeast.
Yeah, yeah.
All the time you will find breakers hitting it, whether it is southwest monsoon or northeast monsoon.
No, I was
Northeast
talking-
is more severe.
Yeah. I was mainly talking about the Elend, the mobile
No,
Elends.
for
that's all.
island, sir, even
I agree, you
need
need
a
the antenna.
small
I agree,
bag.
I agree.
I have gone just a mile from the island.
Yeah.
I have not seen anything.
Yeah, I agree.
That is the
Well, that's very reassuring.
Any questions? Yeah.
Sir, my question is with the recent Chinese premier visiting Delhi and the PLA then stubbornly asked to leave or whatever is what the media report said. But did the Narendra Modi government have some kind of an understanding or what is actually happened? What you feel was the
No.
outcome of the meeting?
No, if you go by the Chinese pattern of behavior, this is what they do. At times of significant political events, they'll stage these military maneuvers to make the point that this is disputed issue, that we are not backing off. And at the same time when this was happening, 2 days after returning to Beijing, the papers here reported that Xi Jinping said that we have to be prepared for regional wars, to not just to prepare to fight, but to win regional wars. And by the way, just on that point, the PLA documents that the Central Intelligence Agency collected sometime in the 1990s, and they have now been translated by Michael Pillsbury in America, and you can find them there. They state plainly that for the next 30 years we don't want war. This is 1990s, right? So we are reaching the point where they'll want war. And by the way, that also keeps up to the Chinese. They have said so, that this is the time to build peace and this, that. And after we become strong is when we will take care of business, in essence. So there in the PLA, the most secret documents that the CIA somehow managed to obtain, the Central Military Commission General Staff plainly says that we have to be prepared for wars with three countries. You know in what order? India first. Just so we know. India is first. Vietnam comes second. Japan comes third. Japan comes third. Lest we be complacent, because we become complacent at the drop of a hat. Immediately, but the threat is not imminent. India is number one. Because if they reduce India, they have taken care of business in Southern Asia, in Indian Ocean region for the rest of this century, the new century, and forever, considering our own plight. Because once geographic and maritime space is lost, it stays lost. You cannot recover it. just as you cannot recover Tibet, just as you cannot recover Coco Islands, just as you cannot recover the Kachatevu Island. You cannot recover this, you cannot recover that. The Chinese are very clear. So when a very clear-minded adversary meets a completely confused adversarial nation, for China it's a boon to have such an adversary, which is really not an adversary, it's not a match. And therefore, I think we have so much to do in terms of, and it's not a matter of increasing our defense expenditure. I was the advisor defense expenditure to the 10th Finance Commission. In the classified study, and it's 15 years old, so I can say it now, is the classified study very, I did a timeline thing, and you have completely misused your financial resources. Instead of building up against China, you built up against Pakistan, against whom you have overwhelming forces which you don't require, which you will never use, which you continue to fund and to maintain and modernize. The most costly element in the Indian army, in the entire Indian military, is our armored formations, the armored and mechanized formations. They constitute between 23 and 29% of your budget on an annual basis. Just eat up. There's nothing you can do. So I suggested in that classified report recommendations which the government of Narasimha Rao accepted in toto, but it's never been implemented because of the army opposition. Wherein I said, you rationalize your 3 strike corps. 3 strike corps is enormous. People don't realize what 3 strike corps are. 3 strike corps worth of armor is more armor than Montgomery fielded in the 8th Army at Alamein. Do you know that? That the Germans fielded at Kursk. 2,500 tanks. You just have to see a squadron of tanks going to, it's mesmerizing. People are taken up by it because people in the Indian military, the Indian army still lives in Second World War. They talk of Rommel and Guderian and so on and so forth. But that time is past. But everybody in the Indian army wants to be a Guderian or a Rommel or a Montgomery. Arey Baba, those are yesterday's wars. Then either you have to go back in time to fight those wars, but if you have the wherewithal to fight those wars today, they're useless. Because a tank can be taken out at 3 miles by a missile. At 3 miles, you won't even get into killing range before you are finished by an anti-tank missile. That's how far and further the anti-tank armaments have advanced. We don't seem to understand anything because, like in all bureaucracies, the worst bureaucracy in the world is a military bureaucracy. Even worse than our Babu, civilian bureaucracy. They are the worst. So you have an armor bureaucracy with very powerful combat arm, and they won't allow this change. I said rationalize it to 1 strike corps, get the establishment of 2 strike corps to mountain divisions, mountain offensive corps, which again, this is what the offensive military corps is about, was there in my classified report, which the government is implementing in drips and drabs, rather than in one swell go. That's how you have to do it. You can't do it in drop by drop. Unless you can fight against the Chinese on the Tibetan plateau, you don't have leverage against the Chinese. But you're quite happy to beat up on Pakistanis all the time.
Any questions? Yeah.
Sir, you said about the Brahmaputra diversion, but the international law on rivers and riparian rights, it comes only if it is obstructed. And China says it will not hinder the flow.
Yeah.
That is how present will be.
Yeah, but that's what they'll always say, no?
But no,
I mean, if you believe them, you can believe anything. I mean, the point is, if you look at
my question is the international law on rivers and riparian rights there, unless it is prevented, whether it gives a right to the
No, that is the flow of the river dams are allowed under international law. That's the reason why on the Indus we have built up on the Satluj and so on, we have built up dams in Kashmir. And the Pakistanis are squawking all they want, and they have lost in the adjudication process. But that's different. What I'm talking about is the pattern, the Chinese pattern. I told you about the Imperial Canal. This is from 7th century AD now. The Imperial Canal was built. So the river diversion has been happening now for about 1300 years in China. It's nothing new. I'm saying Chinese keep to historical patterns. If you know the history, you know you can expect this. The diversion of Brahmaputra, because as I said, 2/3 of the land, agricultural land in China is in the north. Only a fifth of the freshwater resources are in the north. Therefore, they have to have water from somewhere. Why won't they get it from Tibet, which they consider their own? This is what they're going to do. And they've built up, as I said, all the headworks. We have evidence. We have everything. Why? They're just waiting for an opportune moment to begin diverting. And then they'll present you with a fait accompli. What will you do? Especially with I just told you what Shiv Shankar Menon said. He said, oh, we'll lose only 30%. No big deal. So if it's not a big deal, why should you worry? You shouldn't worry. You shouldn't worry at all.
Sir, I got two questions to you. How come you didn't touch Jammu and Kashmir at all in your talk? Jammu and Kashmir doesn't come under the national security at all? Because everyone in this country feels that Jammu and Kashmir is a that problem is a national security problem. Number two, when China has taken over Hong Kong, Macau, Tibet and everything, how come they have left Mongolia itself? Why they have not taken over Mongolia, such a small sovereign state which is in the Chinese border itself?
Yeah.
How come? And number three, Vietnam, as you said, was able to fight against United States and United States, Vietnam.
Yes.
But in India, is it because as you said, the patriotism of the people, Vietnamese are ready to sacrifice anything and everything for their country.
Correct.
So that country is the strong country where the people are ready to sacrifice anything and everything for their country. Are our people like that now? Thank you.
Well, you answered your own question, really. I mean, what's there to say? It's a rhetorical question. But I think on the other parts, Jammu and Kashmir, I think 370 is a travesty. Article 370 is a travesty. I've been advocating its repeal or, trashing the damn thing, because it was in any case supposed to be a temporary measure. In the Constitution, if you look at it, it was a temporary measure. In the Constitution, if you look at the constitutional debates, that's precisely. You can stretch out temporary to 200 years. That's up to you. But the point is that Pakistanis have no such illusion of temporariness. In 1953, General Ayub Khan, then general, he had not appointed himself field marshal then. General Ayub Khan, in 1953, in a Pakistan Army note, said that hereafter, they had a separate forces that they called Azad Kashmir forces. So he, in an army circular, said, we should stop this nonsense about Azad circular forces. This is Pakistan Army. See, I mean, they have integrated their part of Kashmir into Pakistan. They have this paper assembly in Muzaffarabad, who just take some orders from Islamabad and they're quite happy. But we are unwilling to absorb Kashmir. You know as well as I do why. Because our politicians simply do not have the will to do the right thing by the national interest.
Are they afraid of Pakistan?
Not Pakistan. Our internal domestic Islamic votes, that's what. It's not Pakistan. Pakistan never comes into the picture. Secular, yeah. We are a secular republic. And therefore, you are always worried about any taint on the secularism, ostensible secularism of this country. So, I mean, I don't see why, but we are very sensitive to it.
China is telling they have got one government, but many systems. Hong Kong one system, Tibet one government. We have got two governments and one system.
Yeah.
One government. They have two and one.
You know,
And then Mongolia, sir?
Yeah, the Mongolia, I think the Chinese would have absorbed it too, were it not for the Russians who blockaded them. The Russians came in very strongly. And by the way, we have played a lovely game in Mongolia. For a change, we have done something somewhat intriguingly clever. We appointed for 30 years, we had a Tibetan Lama as ambassador. And he is virtually, he's not just the Indian ambassador, he's not there anymore. He was not only for 30 or 40 years, he was not only the Indian ambassador, but the Buddhist, the center of Mongolian religious, it was the Mongolian religious center. Center of Mongolian Buddhism, it was the Indian embassy. It's a very powerful post. And he was a Lama who was deputed by the Dalai Lama. Yeah, you send him there, he's a very good man. So he used to give discourses in Buddhism and so on and so forth, every weekly discourses at the embassy. And thousands of people in Ulaanbaatar would listen to him as a religious leader and visionary. He was an ambassador, the cleverest thing our Indian diplomacy has ever done. And that's the only thing perhaps we have done.
Sir, you spoke about Shiv Shankar Menon. Do we see a ray of hope with our current NSA tipped as James Bond?
No, Ajit Doval is, he's a very, very, very effective operations man. The first operationally experienced NSA we have had. Shiv Shankar Menon, I'm sorry? Yeah, all IFS, but then you had Mike Narayanan also, a policeman. Policemen have even more truncated notions. They have such limited ideas of, anyway, I won't go into that. He was my colleague on the National Security Advisory Board, the first one, so I have bad things to say about him. I've said it publicly when he was there, so he has never forgiven me. But I believe he lives here in Madras. We just met at the airport some time back. He was going off somewhere. And he was a policeman. Mani Dixit was the Foreign Service. Shiv Shankar Menon was Foreign Service. And was there anybody else? Currently, there's another policeman, Doval. The difference between Mike Narayanan and Doval is, and this is a very, very significant difference. Narayanan was an IB, Intelligence Bureau, internal policing, internal intelligence. He essentially did a lot of political intelligence, meaning for the Congress party, if I may say so, very bluntly. But Doval is a counterintelligence foreign postings operative. He created havoc in Pakistan. Pakistanis fear him a lot because he was declared persona non grata by the Pakistan government and thrown out.